The battlefield was a sprawling expanse of scorched earth and broken metal plating, the air thick with the acrid stench of smoke and blood. The sky above, once clear blue, had been darkened by swirling ash clouds that obscured the sun's rays, casting everything in an eerie twilight glow. Corporal Marcus Santos moved through this desolate landscape on hands and knees, his combat medic gear caked with dried mud and debris from explosions. He was a lean figure, with a worn face that held the weight of countless battles fought and lives saved or lost. His eyes were kind, but weary, bearing witness to scenes too brutal for mere memory. "Any sign?" he called out over his radio, voice hoarse from days without sleep and weeks in this relentless conflict against the Draconi. His squad mates responded with a series of terse negatives. The noise on comms was minimal today. Everyone seemed as exhausted as Marcus himself. He had been trained to look beyond these immediate risks and search for the wounded even when there appeared no hope left. Marcus paused, listening intently over his radio. His ears caught something, a faint rustling sound that wasn't part of the battlefield's usual chaos. It was distant but unmistakable, a Draconi warrior moving despite being mortally injured or worse. "Santos here," he said into the comms unit on his belt. "I have an unknown position, possibly wounded Draconi to my northeast." There were no immediate responses. His fellow humans had their own priorities. He continued alone towards the source of the sound, moving silently through scattered debris and charred remains. As Marcus approached a particularly large crater filled with shattered metal hulls and twisted pieces of what looked like alien technology, he found it a massive Draconi warrior lying partially buried beneath a section of torn apart armor plating. This was no ordinary soldier. This was War Chief Thrakus himself, one of the highest ranking Draconi commanders left on their side of the battlefield. Thrakus' appearance alone demanded respect and fear from those who faced him in battle. 9 feet tall, bronze scales shimmering with a golden hue due to reflections off nearby fires. Battle scars adorned his muscular form, each mark telling tales of fierce combat. But now he was still, eyes half closed as life slowly drained away. Marcus knelt beside the Draconi leader without hesitation or fear, had seen too many horrors in his years as a medic not to recognize when someone needed help regardless of their side's uniform color. He checked vitals quickly and efficiently. Thrakus' pulse was faint, barely perceptible under dried blood that clung stubbornly to skin. "Heart rate is dangerously low," Marcus muttered aloud more than anything else. "But it's dehydration, not combat wounds." Thrakus opened his eyes slightly when he felt the human medic hovering over him, golden irises catching and reflecting what little light there was in this nightmarish scene of battle aftermaths. There had been times during battles where these same eyes would bore into Marcus with pure hatred, but now they held an entirely different kind of emotion, a silent plea for mercy. "Look at me," Marcus said gently, trying to hold the Dracon's gaze, even as Thrakus began struggling against his weakened state. "You're dying here." The Draconi grunted in response. Perhaps some distant part of him understood what was happening despite his condition worsening by the second. His scales were drier than they should be, and breaths came shallowly, lips cracking from thirst. "You can't survive much longer out here," Marcus continued firmly but kindly. "I need to give you water." A Dracon's eyes widened ever so slightly at these words. Never had any human dared such a thing under war conditions, where mercy was rare as gold in asteroid mining operations on the far side of Jupiter. "This is going to seem weird." Marcus pulled out his canteen and unscrewed it, holding it up before Thrakus. The liquid inside glistened faintly, like hope itself caught mid-fall from a shattered sky. "But I have to if we're both going home." Marcus lifted the Dracon's head carefully with one hand while steadying himself on his knee in preparation for what felt impossibly dangerous and yet crucial. He could feel Thrakus watching him intently, memorizing every feature of this human who was doing something utterly unthinkable. "He'll make it quick," Marcus promised softly as he brought the canteen close to the Dracon's lips. The water trickled into dryness that had been there far too long without rest or care in sight between warring factions. "Try and drink slowly." Thrakus did so, mouth opening obediently yet hesitantly. There was a sense of deep trust beginning alongside disbelief at Marcus' actions. "Just enough to help," Marcus urged softly when the canteen began getting lighter. The Draconi swallowed with visible effort before lying back weakly against whatever makeshift shelter he could find amidst this devastation wrought by war machines and alien forces clashing over control for resources beyond their world's grasp. Thrakus' eyes focused sharply on Marcus one last time. There was a bond forming now, unspoken but clear in mutual acknowledgment of the code both honored: care for those who suffer regardless of rank or species boundaries. "Thank you," Thrakus rasped weakly yet strongly enough that it registered beyond mere gratitude. Marcus nodded back silently as he carefully resealed his canteen and stood up slowly, his heart pounding with a mix of fear, exhilaration, and deep understanding about what this act meant for both himself and the Draconi leader lying before him. He didn't know how many others had seen or would remember later, but right now there were two sets of eyes staring across an invisible line drawn by conflict. "Just take it easy," Marcus said finally, as he began to move away, leaving the water that was just enough. "He'll stay close." Thrakus' golden gaze followed him for a moment longer before closing again. Marcus knew instinctively this wasn't goodbye, but rather recognition of something far deeper in these times where battles were fought not only with weapons, but also acts unseen by most eyes. The chapter ends as it was meant to. Marcus doesn't know what he just started, standing at the edge of a boundary that extends beyond mere war and into understanding across species lines through an act of compassion in dire moments. Marcus hurriedly covered Thrakus with pieces of debris and splintered wood from nearby structures damaged by the recent battle. He knew moving the Draconi would be impossible even with his strength as a medic. He could barely lift one of their smaller weapons. The giant's body was heavy, too broad to navigate through narrow gaps without risking further injury or alerting anyone that might see them. "Just stay here," Marcus whispered urgently, glancing around for any sign of other combatants nearby before turning back to the Draconi. "He'll be right outside if you need anything." Thrakus' golden eyes opened once more as Marcus left him behind, and he watched intently, a strange mix of confusion and determination lingering in his gaze. It was clear this wasn't just water Thrakus had received. It felt like an entire new world being offered. Marcus took out another canteen from the small pack at his side and placed it beside Thrakus's head before leaving more than enough to last until he could return. He then stepped back into a safer hiding spot, pressing himself against crumbling walls that still bore remnants of paint advertising an old company's slogan, faded and obscured by battle damage. "Corporal," Private Chen called out from his position not far away as Marcus made it back towards the main group of their squad on their scouting mission. "Where have you been?" Marcus paused, taking a deep breath before responding with a calm exterior, that hid how much he had just gone through. His heart still pounded heavily beneath his armor. Just checking out some potential enemy positions, Marcus lied smoothly. He wasn't about to break any rules by mentioning what really happened. It was against regulations and common sense in their current state of war. But more importantly, it violated the trust they all had with each other if he were found doing such a thing behind enemy lines. The truth gnawed at him as his squad continued moving forward towards their next objective. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something monumental might be changing here beyond just water for one wounded Draconi lying in rubble. As night gave way to morning, Marcus woke up early, before everyone else was stirring around them on their assigned positions. A chill crept through the air as dawn approached. It had been a cold front moving across the planet since they arrived from their space station orbiting Jupiter's moon Callisto days ago. He quickly packed his gear and set off back towards where he left Thrakus. The sun began to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows that made him pause at each turn in case someone else was out watching as well. Once he reached the area near a ruined factory building where his last conversation with the Draconi had taken place, Marcus felt both anticipation and dread knotting up inside him. Did you stay?" Marcus muttered to himself once more under his breath when no one answered back. He stepped closer towards what used to be an office entryway leading into deeper parts of the structure where debris blocked any clear view beyond it now. To his astonishment, Thrakus was gone from exactly how had left him behind. Only the empty canteens remained on a splintered piece of wood nearby as evidence. Marcus' eyes narrowed slightly. Where had the Draconi warrior moved to? He couldn't just disappear without leaving any trace in this battle-torn environment. Marcus followed faint tracks that led away from his makeshift hiding spot towards what appeared now to be another pile of debris further down a narrow alleyway between buildings he could see where heavy feet might have walked through, pushing aside more remnants left behind by recent clashes. Marcus' heart skipped as the evidence suggested Thrakus had survived and made it somewhere safe, for at least further away from here. "Did you make it?" Marcus whispered aloud towards those tracks leading into deeper parts of ruined buildings nearby. "Hope so." As he turned to head back, there was a sense of relief mixed with confusion in his gut. This wasn't something any military man could really understand unless they had experienced the kind of strange honor code that governed beings like Draconi warriors. Back at their unit's temporary base camp, set up far away from immediate conflict zones, but close enough to move swiftly when needed, Marcus joined everyone else around a shared breakfast meal laid out on portable tables. None knew about his actions earlier. They wouldn't until news leaked or some other unforeseen event brought it to light. The day went by with drills and more scouting missions planned for the future. No one seemed aware of anything extraordinary having occurred under their noses recently due to strict adherence, not only towards protocol, but mutual trust within ranks. Marcus kept silent, focusing instead on his duties as a combat medicating wounded soldiers without asking questions or seeking recognition. By evening's fall into night again, he was once more alone with nothing but thoughts of what he had done and whether it would ever come back to haunt him one day. Right now, though, all Marcus could feel was exhaustion from days of relentless fighting alongside fear that perhaps leaving Thrakus water had been the wrong choice after all. He put everything behind him as best he could for tonight's sleep cycle under a sky filled with distant stars twinkling silently overhead, unaware of wars fought beneath them. His actions hadn't been about creating legends or forging new paths between species. Marcus simply did what his medical training told him was right no matter the circumstances, an act that would ripple far beyond anything anyone expected. And yet, for now at least, he could pretend this chapter was closed and begin anew with only vague inklings of something greater having started here without knowing exactly how it might unfold. Chapter 3 Night Camp. The night was a symphony of silence broken only by distant echoes of battle and the occasional rustle of leaves carried on the wind. At the heart of their temporary base camp stood a cluster of tents where Corporal Marcus Santos sat hunched over medical supplies, his brow furrowed in concern as he prepared for what seemed inevitable mass casualties, with no hope of escape. "Marcus," Sergeant Ramirez called out from across the makeshift encampment, her voice tinged with fatigue, but still commanding attention. "Get your gear ready. We've received intel that a Draconi force is moving our way." Marcus nodded without looking up, his hands steady as he organized bandages and syringes into easily accessible piles beside him. "How big?" "Massive," Ramirez replied tersely. "We're talking at least 378 warriors." His eyes widened momentarily before narrowing in determination. He couldn't let panic set in. There were soldiers counting on his expertise to keep them alive for just one more day. "I'll have everything ready by the time you give me a fighting position," Marcus promised, setting down his task and meeting Ramirez's gaze with unwavering resolve. "Good man," she acknowledged grimly. "You're our best hope in this mess." As Ramirez departed to coordinate defensive strategies elsewhere around their perimeter, Marcus found himself alone once more amidst the clutter of medical equipment laid out before him. He couldn't shake off thoughts about Thrakus despite his pledge not to dwell on any actions that might come back as shadows under a bright sun. What if he survived? What would I do now if they were coming for me instead of engaging in battle with us? Marcus shook himself, pushing such musings away. There was no time for what-ifs. Every second counted, and his focus needed to be on the task ahead, preparing medical stations at multiple points within their defensive lines. Hours later, as darkness cloaked everything save for faint campfires flickering amidst dirt and stone barricades hastily erected from scavenged materials, Marcus stood beside another medic named Lisa, both of them overseeing preparations for triage areas scattered throughout. The air was thick with tension, and the distant hum of battle nearing closer by each passing moment. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice breaking through his reverie. "What's going on in that head of yours?" He turned to face her squarely under moonlight filtering down through gaps between tents and trees, silvering their faces into stark contrasts against shadowed backgrounds. For a heartbeat they stared at each other wordlessly before Marcus offered a small smile. "Just thinking about why I became a medic," he admitted honestly after exhaling deeply. "Remember when we first met?" Lisa's lips curved upward slightly in shared memory of better times and less dire circumstances. Those early days where everyone was still whole enough to laugh over mistakes or triumphs equally. "I remember you told me it wasn't just about patching up wounds," she recalled gently now. "It was also about hope." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and determination that Lisa recognized all too well from the countless faces had treated since war began. "It's why I couldn't leave Thrakus there to die alone last night, even though we were told differently," Marcus confided further. "I just couldn't." Lisa blinked slowly, absorbing this revelation before asking quietly, "Thrakus? You mean that Draconi warrior?" He nodded once more without elaborating beyond confirming her deduction. "And you think maybe he'll come for us?" Lisa asked hesitantly then, knowing full well the implications of such an action if true. Marcus sighed deeply and shrugged helplessly. "I hope not. but what happens next depends on his honor code. Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Martinez, voice booming over a loudspeaker system set up around camp perimeters. All units, stand ready. Our scouts report Draconi forces are within visual range, moving in from the east. Marcus and Lisa exchanged grim looks before turning to their stations once more. Preparations had been thorough, yet nothing could truly prepare them for what was about to happen. This would either be one final battle, or a new kind of war with unforeseen consequences. As Marcus moved along rows of makeshift beds laid out within larger tents, now filled with soldiers awaiting casualties, his mind wandered back briefly to Thrakus. Perhaps hope wasn't just something given during moments between stitches and bandages, but also carried forward like embers left glowing after battles in dead, whether in the form of a Draconi warrior bound by ancient codes or among weary humans facing extinction. If I don't make it through this, Marcus thought grimly, at least they won't die without knowing what we fought for. Night gave way reluctantly to dawn's first light, filtering faintly across landscape transformed overnight into grounds where survival became paramount. The air smelled heavy with dust, stirred by approaching feet, and distant sounds of conflict growing louder every second. Sergeant Ramirez approached Marcus, who stood at one end of largest triage tent, overseeing initial assessments being conducted efficiently despite rising panic among injured soldiers already flooding in from skirmishes fought earlier. She spoke quietly yet firmly. Under these conditions, where shouting could disrupt focus crucially needed now more than ever before. Marcus, she said solemnly, amidst bustling medics and injured alike filing past towards beds laid out neatly, were almost surrounded. He nodded grimly as response, his eyes darting around area briefly to assess situation further even while maintaining calm demeanor required here under current circumstances. Medical supplies lined shelves nearby ready for immediate use. Every single soldier treated needed maximum efficiency from this point on. Tell me something I don't already know, Marcus replied dryly, with hint of bitterness underlying tone, but also acceptance facing reality, squarely now unavoidable no matter how much wished otherwise. Ramirez hesitated briefly before continuing, I just want you prepared. Our scouts confirmed their numbers there exactly as we feared. Marcus sighed deeply, then turned to face her fully, under dim light beginning to fill space around them gradually with dawn's approach. He met Ramirez's gaze squarely now, understanding gravity of moment without needing further elaboration upon situation unfolding rapidly outside. All right, he said finally, voice steady despite emotions roiling beneath surface visible in his eyes suddenly reflecting pain and fear mingled equally, perhaps for first time openly acknowledged here amidst impending chaos about to erupt within few moments. We'll handle it, as long as there's breath left in our bodies. With those words spoken between them under gathering light of new day, Marcus turned once more towards awaiting casualties needing care immediately, his hands already moving swiftly into action, setting priorities amongst injuries arriving steadily from front lines, approaching ever closer now beyond protective barricades hastily erected around camp. And thus dawn broke, not merely with hope, but resolve shared equally among those about to face greatest trial yet in war, unlike any other before seen or imagined, where humans stood side by side against dragons, both bound by codes of honor rarely understood until faced head-on under circumstances far outside comfort zones either species previously encountered. The dawn light sliced through the gray fog of early morning as Sergeant Ramirez and Corporal Marcus Santos stood side by side at one end of the largest triage tent. Each air was thick with dust from countless troop movements, mingled with the acrid smell of spilled blood and sweat-soaked uniforms. Inside, medics worked feverishly to tend to injured soldiers who had been rushed in following skirmishes fought just hours before. "Marcus," Sergeant Ramirez said softly but urgently under her breath, as she pointed towards a map laid out on a nearby table covered by a thin layer of medical supplies. "Our scouts report that the Draconi have encircled us." Marcus nodded grimly, his eyes scanning over the hastily drawn lines marking enemy movements before returning to meet Ramirez's gaze squarely beneath the flickering lanterns overhead. "Tell me something I don't already know," Marcus replied dryly, though there was a hint of bitterness underlying his words. His fingers clenched around an empty syringe as he continued, "We're ready for them." Ramirez hesitated before she spoke again, her voice tight with the weight of unspoken fears. "I just want you prepared. The numbers are exactly what we feared. They've closed in completely now." Marcus sighed deeply and turned to face Ramirez fully, under the dim light beginning to fill their surroundings as dawn approached. His eyes darted around briefly before meeting hers again resolutely. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady despite the emotions roiling beneath the surface, visible in his eyes suddenly reflecting pain and fear mingled equally for perhaps the first time openly, acknowledged here amidst impending chaos about to erupt within moments. "Well, handle it as long as there's breath left." With those words spoken between them under gathering light of new day, Marcus turned once more towards awaiting casualties needing care. Immediately his hands, already moving swiftly into action, setting priorities amongst injuries arriving steadily from front lines, approaching ever closer now beyond protective barricades hastily erected around camp. Sergeant Ramirez watched as Marcus moved with a calm efficiency that belied the turmoil within him. She had seen this resolve before. Marcus was one of their best combat medics, and his ability to remain composed under pressure saved lives countless times already during their prolonged conflict against the Draconi. Yet today felt different. There were more unknowns than ever before. The sounds outside intensified as dawn broke, full lithe, distant clashing metal of armor on armor, and muffled roars echoing through the air grew louder with each passing moment, signaling that the final confrontation was upon them now beyond doubt or hesitation anymore. Ramirez's instinct screamed at her to prepare for the worst, while holding out hope desperately. Against all odds, they could somehow find a way through this. "Corporal Santos," she called out as Marcus passed by yet again tending to another casualty. "How many do we have ready?" He paused briefly before answering, with precise clarity despite mounting chaos around them. He looked up at Ramirez, meeting her eye directly now in full acknowledgement of reality confronting both sides equally today, no more hiding behind half-truths or optimistic hopes. 37, Marcus replied without hesitation, the number etched clearly on his face amidst growing strain visible there suddenly beneath surface previously hidden by professional demeanor alone. 3/4 are fit to fight, remaining quarter still stabilizing. Sergeant Ramirez nodded once before turning back towards map laying out enemy movements meticulously documented over past few hours, now looking almost obsolete already under ever-changing battlefield dynamics, emerging today clearly. "All right," she said quietly but firmly, her voice carrying, despite rising din of approaching conflict outside growing louder every second. "We'll need to use terrain advantageously. Make sure everyone knows their positions." Marcus nodded sharply before he turned back towards triage tent, where medics worked tirelessly, attending to injured soldiers arriving in rapid succession now under relentless pace setting by Marcus himself ensuring maximum efficiency from all hands available here, amidst mounting casualties, threatening rapidly overwhelming capacities soon. As dawn broke fully, light filtered through gaps between protective barricades erected around camp, revealing enemy encirclement clearly visible for first time today. No hiding behind illusions, and a more stark reality of their situation now lay exposed under cold morning sun. The air felt heavy with tension and dust kicked up by approaching feet, nearing ever closer beyond lines set long ago, now crumbling rapidly before unyielding force bearing down upon them. "Corporal Santos," shouted the commander over calm link, his voice carrying strain despite attempts to maintain composure amidst mounting pressure evident here. "Prepare your troops for final push." Marcus nodded sharply once more as he turned towards medics working alongside him under triage tent now filled beyond capacity with injured soldiers filing in steadily from front lines, approaching ever closer now, unrelenting force closing in rapidly upon them without pause or hesitation. "Everyone on alert," Marcus called out clearly, amidst growing din rising around camp, his voice carrying through calm links set up amongst all hands here, ensuring everyone remained updated constantly. "Weapons ready." Moments later, as last stragglers of injured soldiers were being settled under triage tents, protective cover now filled beyond capacity, with casualties arriving steadily from front lines, approaching ever closer now, unrelenting force closing in rapidly upon them without pause or hesitation. Sergeant Ramirez approached Marcus once more at one end of makeshift medical center, where calm efficiency set earlier amidst mounting chaos around camp suddenly began to unravel quickly as enemy movements intensified visibly, under growing din rising every second. "Marcus," she called out urgently but softly over calm link, ensuring message reached him clearly despite rising noise levels rapidly overtaking peaceful atmosphere established mere moments ago. "Enemy movement accelerating. We need to prepare." Marcus nodded once more sharply before he turned back towards triage tent, where medics worked tirelessly, attending to injured soldiers arriving in rapid succession, now under relentless pace set by Marcus himself, ensuring maximum efficiency from all hands available here amidst mounting casualties, threatening rapidly overwhelming capacities soon. "Everyone on alert," Marcus called out clearly, amidst growing din rising around camp, his voice carrying through calm links set up amongst all hands here, ensuring everyone remained updated constantly. "Weapons ready." As final preparations were being made under dim light still filtering faintly across grounds now transformed overnight into battlefield, where survival became paramount amidst mounting casualties, threatening rapidly overwhelming capacities soon, movement caught Marcus' attention, suddenly breaking tension hanging heavy over camp now like tangible thing pressing down upon them all equally. A single Draconi approached their position, unarmed, but massive figure towering 9 feet tall with bronze scales and golden eyes, reflecting determination clearly despite weakened state visibly evident under careful approach taken here. Every soldier held breath briefly as alien warrior moved steadily forward, now stopping just beyond range of protective barricades erected around camp now filled with injured soldiers filing in from skirmishes fought earlier. "Marcus," Sergeant Ramirez hissed quietly over calm link, ensuring message reached him clearly amidst rising din surrounding them all equally now under growing tension hanging heavy over battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them. "That's War Chief Thrakus," Marcus said quietly back to Ramirez, over calm link, without hesitation recognizing figure approaching their position clearly despite weakened state visibly evident under careful approach taken here, amidst mounting tension hanging heavy over camp now like tangible thing pressing down equally upon all hands present today. "He wants something. Why would he come unarmed?" Sergeant Ramirez asked sharply, her voice reflecting confusion and caution, evenly balanced carefully, as she glanced towards commander stationed nearby monitoring situation closely now rapidly unfolding beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them. "I'm not sure," Marcus replied honestly, over calm link without hesitation, his eyes locked on Draconi figure moving steadily forward now stopping just beyond range of protective barricades erected around camp. "But he's here for a reason." War Chief Thrakus halted abruptly, under careful approach taken here, amidst mounting tension hanging heavy over battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them now without pause or hesitation. His golden eyes locked onto Marcus, position clearly recognizing him immediately despite weakened state visibly evident under careful approach taken here amidst mounting casualties, threatening rapidly, overwhelming capacities soon. "I am War Chief Thrakus," he called out loudly, but calmly, over battlefield sounds quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago now crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation. "I speak to the water giver." Commander Ramirez, who had moved closer by now, stared at Thrakus with a mixture of shock and wariness. "The what?" she asked sharply over calm link ensuring messagery. Ached Marcus clearly, amidst rising din surrounding battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here under mounting pressure evident visibly. Marcus stepped forward, almost instinctively despite growing tension hanging heavy over camp, now like tangible thing pressing down on him, and every soldier around alike amidst rising din surrounding battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here under mounting pressure evident visibly. "That's me," Marcus replied calmly yet firmly over calm link ensuring message reached Thrakus clearly, amidst rising din surrounding battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation now threatening all hands present equally here under mounting pressure evident visibly. Every human weapon aimed at War Chief Thrakus, while every draconic weapon pointed towards humans in response. A single wrong move could result in instant annihilation for both sides alike amidst rising tension hanging heavy over battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here, under mounting pressure evident visibly. War Chief Thrakus stood tall and unyielding before Marcus, his bronze scales glinting faintly under the dim morning light filtering through gaps between shattered defensive barriers. The battlefield around them was a chaotic mess of debris and wounded soldiers, human and draconi alike, lay scattered amidst the ruins like discarded toys after a child's playtime. Corporal Marcus Santos, Thrakus began, his voice steady yet carrying an unmistakable weight that commanded attention even over the cacophony of explosions and distant shouts. You gave water to a dying enemy. By our oldest codes, you have honor claim. Marcus blinked in confusion, adjusting his combat gear as he took in War Chief Thrakus' immense figure towering before him. The Draconi warrior was easily 9 feet tall, with golden eyes that pierced through the chaos like lasers cutting metal. Despite his weakened state, his scales were marred by numerous battle scars, and some deep wounds, still oozing blood, radiated an aura of command. I don't know what that means, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the rising tension all around them. His comrades stood at ready positions behind him, weapons drawn, but hands hesitant to pull triggers. Thrakus' massive jaw flexed slightly as he processed Marcus's words before continuing. It means you showed mercy when you owed none. This debt must be paid. Commander Ramirez stepped forward uncertainly, her hand tightening on the grip of her rifle. She exchanged a wary glance with other human soldiers surrounding them. Draconi warriors had their weapons trained straight ahead too. Why would you do this? She asked sharply over the calm link, ensuring communication reached Marcus clearly. Amidst rising din surrounding battlefield quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here, under mounting pressure evident visibly. Thrakus' eyes shifted from Ramirez to Marcus. Because he did it first. Marcus took a breath, his gaze meeting Thrakus' unwavering stare once again. He could see something shifting in the Draconi warrior's expression, some kind of internal conflict that made him lean forward slightly, almost as if he wanted desperately for this strange exchange between them to mean more than just some arcane honor code. Look, Marcus began hesitantly. I did what a medic does. I can't leave someone dying out there. A murmur spread among the Draconi warriors surrounding Thrakus, a ripple of uncertainty and confusion running through their ranks as they processed this information for themselves, under mounting pressure evident visibly here, amidst rising tension hanging heavy over camp, now like tangible thing pressing down on them all alike. Thrakus' golden eyes narrowed, but there was something different in his gaze, something akin to respect that slowly began transforming into reluctant understanding. He nodded once firmly, then addressed the group at large with a commanding voice, ringing clear despite chaos around them, quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here, under mounting pressure evident visibly. Your company is under my protection, he declared loudly and clearly. We will escort you to safe territory. The human soldiers exchanged uncertain looks among themselves, many of their eyes darting nervously towards the Draconi warriors who stood in a protective semicircle around War Chief Thrakus now, amidst rising din surrounding battlefield, quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, but crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon them without pause or hesitation, now threatening all hands present equally here, under mounting pressure evident visibly. Commander Ramirez's grip on her rifle loosened slightly as she processed this unexpected turn of events. "What about you?" she asked, directing the question at Marcus, while keeping a wary eye on War Chief Thrakus and his Draconi warriors surrounding them amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down equally here. Marcus' shoulders relaxed marginally before turning to face her directly with unwavering resolve shining in his eyes. "I'm staying," he replied decisively, without hesitation, not breaking eye contact even as the Draconess shifted restlessly around War Chief Thrakus amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down equally here. The Draconi warriors began to move into defensive positions surrounding Marcus and his comrades, while Commander Ramirez jaw tightened with determination. "Marcus," she started, her voice firm but concerned none the less despite mounting pressure evident visibly under rising tension, hanging heavy over battlefield, quickly emerging today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation, now threatening equally here. "Just do what's best for the company," Marcus said firmly, nodding towards her with a finality that brooked no argument amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation. Thrakus' gaze shifted back to Marcus, then locking onto him with unwavering intensity. "I will ensure your safe passage," he promised solemnly, amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation. Marcus nodded once firmly in return, his eyes reflecting a mixture of resolve and gratitude amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation. "Thank you," he said quietly, the words spoken with sincerity that resonated deeply despite rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation. Thrakus' golden eyes flickered with something akin to respect and a reluctant nod of acknowledgement as the Draconi warriors began shifting their positions, lowering weapons slowly amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun, filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force bearing down upon all, without pause or hesitation. The scene settled into an uneasy calm as the Draconi warriors moved to flank Marcus and his human comrades, their massive figures forming a protective barrier around them amidst rising tension, hanging heavy over camp now, like tangible thing pressing down on them alike under mounting pressure, evident visibly today beneath cold morning sun filtering faintly through gaps between protective barriers set long ago, crumbling rapidly before unrelenting force, bearing down upon all without pause or hesitation. The weapons lowered, slowly, uncertainly. They lowered. The escort was tense, but peaceful as Marcus and Thrakus led a column of 378 human warriors through the desolate landscape that marked the border between Draconi territory and safe human grounds. The ground crunched beneath their boots, and the air smelled heavily of smoke and scorched earth from recent battles. Sunlight filtered weakly through clouds, casting long shadows on the uneven terrain. Marcus' heart thumped in his chest as he looked around at the draconic warriors flanking them, their scales glinting bronze under the pale light, their eyes sharp with wariness. Each step was measured and deliberate. No one moved without careful consideration of those nearby. As they approached a particularly rocky outcrop that marked the border between hostile territory and relative safety, Thrakus slowed to an abrupt halt. The giant Draconi turned his massive head toward Marcus, causing a breeze to stir in the dry air around them. His eyes narrowed slightly as he scrutinized the human corporal, golden pupils gleaming with an intensity that made Marcus shift uncomfortably. "Corporal Santos," Thrakus rumbled in a voice that resonated deep within their chests despite his weakened state. "We are at the border now." Marcus nodded once and stopped beside him. His hands were steady as he clasped his canteen firmly against his side where it hung from its usual place on a belt loop. He could feel the eyes of every warrior present upon them, both human and Draconi. Thrakus' gaze sharpened further, drilling into Marcus with an unspoken question in those golden depths. After what felt like ages passing in silence, Thrakus spoke again, his voice low but clear as he addressed him directly. "You gave water to a dying enemy," the draconic warrior said slowly. "Why?" Marcus' lips curved up slightly at one corner. It was not so much a smile as it was an expression of wry acknowledgment. He looked down briefly and then met Thrakus' gaze head on, his voice steady and sincere. "Mimetic," Marcus replied quietly but firmly. "I help people who are hurt." Thrakus blinked once, the action barely perceptible against the severity of his features, a momentary flicker that might have hinted at confusion or deeper contemplation. After another pause, he asked with an almost grudging curiosity, "Even enemies?" Marcus nodded resolutely. "Yes," he affirmed, "especially enemies. If I only help friends, then am not really a healer." A long silence followed Marcus' words, the air heavy and thick between them. The human warriors around them held their breaths expectantly as they waited for Thrakus to respond. It was clear that this exchange weighed heavily on him. Something deep within his rigid honor code had been challenged in a way he hadn't anticipated. Thrakus' golden eyes glowed with an unspoken acknowledgment, and after what felt like ages passing under the weight of their mutual gaze, he finally spoke again. "Your people are strange." Marcus offered a small grin that tugged at the corners of his lips, the faintest hint of humor in it despite everything. "So I've been told." A tense moment passed before Thrakus moved to stand taller against the backdrop of rocky terrain behind them. He placed one massive hand on Marcus' shoulder and regarded him with a solemnity that cut through any remaining tension like steel. "The debt is paid," he declared, his tone resolute yet tinged with something deeper, something almost akin to respect or understanding emerging from beneath his usual stoic exterior. "But I will not forget." Marcus mirrored the gesture by lifting his chin slightly and meeting Thrakus' eyes once more without flinching. "Neither will I," he replied just as firmly, a sense of shared resolve settling between them. With those final words hanging in the air, Marcus felt something shift deep within him, a recognition that despite their differences, this moment had forged an unlikely bond. The Draconi warriors around them seemed to share a collective sigh of relief and respect at what they'd witnessed. 378 pairs of eyes now understood more fully than ever before. The escort resumed its progress without further delay, the uneasy calm returning as if nothing significant had transpired just moments ago. Yet for Marcus and Thrakus, this brief exchange would be etched into memory forever, a small act of mercy that transcended conflict to reveal something profound about both species involved. Sometimes, in times of war, it is not weaponry or strength, but compassion and understanding which hold the greatest power. Thalm continued on toward safer ground beyond their current border. The tension in Marcus' shoulders relaxed slightly. His canteen hung heavier now from having given away its last drops to someone who needed them more desperately than even he did at that moment. But despite the physical burden, there was also a sense of lightness and affirmation that sometimes what you do when no one is watching can change everything. And 378 warriors learned what one human with a canteen could do. Sometimes mercy is the strongest weapon.